and welcome to another evening of frank conversation here on Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. I'm Okeowo Yusuf. The political season is in full swing at the moment, especially now that the Electoral Act has been signed. Parties are in a race to put their house in order in preparation for the timetable as set out by INEC. And if you look in the major headlines, politics has largely taken over. The question is, where is governance? At the start of this year, President Buhari signed into law the 2022 budgetary reservations. Apart from an increase in the benchmark price of crude, which is at the heart of revenue, the president also complained that the National Assembly reduced the provisions for the non-regular allowances of the Nigerian Police Force and the Nigerian Navy by 15 billion naira and 5 billion naira. He complained that that was particularly worrisome because personnel cost provisions are based on agencies' nominal role and approved salaries and allowances. Apart from reductions, there were also increases of 21.72 billion in the overhead budgets of some MDAs, while the sum of 1.96 billion naira was cut from the provision for some MDAs without apparent justification. A lot has happened since the budget was signed. Russia has since invaded Ukraine, and the price of crude has shot up well over $100, with analysts expecting the price to keep going up till the end of the year. Is there anyone paying attention to the issues that have to do with governance as envisaged in the budget which the federal and state governments have put out? Could this unexpected boom in the price of oil really translate to the much-needed development? Or will all the good that should accrue be frittered away, as usually happens in the heavy spending that comes in the year preceding elections with no direct benefit to the lives of millions of Nigerians? These are the questions we pose tonight. My guest is Gabriel Okeowo, who is the Country Director of Budget, a civic organization that applies technology to intersect citizen engagement with institutional improvement. Gabriel Okeowo, welcome to Hard Copy.
Thank you very much, Malcolm.
Well, we're usually involved in a debate. Somehow the executive and the legislature get us involved in that debate every year as to who has the prerogative to determine the benchmark price of crude. But it does look in this instance that the National Assembly has been proven right somewhat with the increase we've seen in the price of crude since this year began. The question now is, are we able to trace whether there's been any benefit whatsoever to either the excess crude account, if it's still in existence, because we understand that the Sovereign Wealth Fund should be the one to benefit from this, or has it been silenced so far so good?
Okay, so picking it up from there, in terms of, in the first place, who should NAS, National Assembly, increase or reduce benchmark put forward by executive. I think as it is now, we are still going to be waiting, because that's not just it. It's about the appropriation in the overall sense of it. And for a long while, judiciary has taken a back seat in this conversation around budget. And all fingers now is pointing towards the need for judiciary to also come out and make some judicial declaration about the legality of the National Assembly to influence, add or remove from whatever that is put forward by the executive. And the reason is quite simple. At the executive, there are experts that are meant to work rigorously, look at different microeconomic statistics to be able to come to certain assumptions.
The executive always has a conservative price for crude oil. The National Assembly oftentimes ups it a bit. But in this instance, the current price of crude has well surpassed the projections of both the executive and the legislature. So that ought to be translating into some benefits, a boom, if you like.
It's meant to be.
Yes.
It's meant to be, but what might erode that is the demon that we still have in our economy, which is subsidy. Right, because now the higher the price of crude oil, I'm afraid to say that might actually also be the higher the amount that is going to now be also retrieved as under recovery, or now that we are being bold about it now as subsidy. For a while, we were not actually calling it subsidy. We were calling it under recovery.
Should we be asking for a little more transparency in that regard? Because it is true, NNPC now claims that they are now a very transparent arm of government. They opened their books and did an audit for the first time in many years. So should we be very clear on what is currently accruing to the government now as a result of this boom, and be asking questions as to what we're really paying in subsidies?
We need to ask that question.
Yeah.
We definitely need to ask that question. And that question should not just come when this under recovery or subsidy has been pulled out. It should start from the budget, the detailed budget of NNPC. NNPC is an agency of government that is also meant to, its budget is meant to be part of the budget that is subjected to the legislative oversight of the National Assembly.
You're a budget expert here. Yes. Is it included?
Considering that most of these government-owned enterprises, the surplus or revenue capacity that is projected in them is meant to feed into this overall plan of government. But we have a situation where the attention is just on the federal government budget, and then no one is paying attention to the government-owned enterprises. We have been very keen, and initially we are thought this was a situation where the GOEs are not respecting that rule of law, but we are getting to know from our recent consultation with some of these GOEs and some executive arm of government agencies, we are getting to know that this budget proposal, just like the federal government proposal, is also presented to the House of Assembly. What then happens is when it is being reviewed or it is being finalized, we don't get to see, it is not out to the public. And we are advocating now also to the executive arm of government. The same way the executive arm of government will publish the proposed federal government budget after the president laid before the National Assembly, I think they also then have the responsibility to at least give us the draft that's of these GOEs that is also submitted to the National Assembly, and then it can then be left as the singular fault of the National Assembly if we don't get to see what was eventually approved. The executive would have done their part, but as it is, we don't get to see it from the executive, we don't get to see it from the legislators.
So there's still some opacity in that area. But when it is that we project how will I put it now, the benchmark price of crude, which is the basis upon which our federal and even the state governments do budget, make their yearly budget, we're not able to really keep an eye on the agency of government which makes this transaction on all our behalf. And as such, it would seem that we lose in that regard. I don't know if a budget has been making any recommendation to entrench that transparency, that if this is what you are projecting, this is how you're hoping to make a lot of the revenue which should come to the budget. Shouldn't we keep an eye on I don't want to say the goose that lays the golden egg, because they're not exactly, they're just the one that transmits the eggs,
okay,
so to speak, to the baskets.
Yes, it's been of interest, and that's why I can come out now. Some months ago, I may not have been too bold to say what the situation of things are. Yeah. But in the last 2 months, we have particularly focused on government-owned enterprises, and we have been meeting and engaging with some of them to know what is happening. Can we begin to see more light in terms of their reports, in terms of their activities, so that we get to know what they are making, how come their budget is not open, and the revelation we are discovering is shocking. It's pointing attention to first the National Assembly, right, that their budget is submitted, however is not processed at the same time when the federal government, the overall budget is processed and submitted back to the executive.
Is NNPC part of the GOEs that you're meeting with?
Well, NNPC is part of it. NNPC, we have not met with NNPC, but we have written to the leadership of NNPC for us to meet with NNPC. And I must say that so if we now want to look at it in terms of those that we even have a clue of what they are doing, we will then pick on NNPC, because I mean, for some years now, NNPC has been consistent in publishing monthly reports of its activities, both operational and financial, right? But the fact remains that that report is just there. There is little remedy to what you see. You see huge amounts going into things like pipeline vandalism and under recovery that is being recorded. And And it is just of recent now that we are now being bold to say this is subsidy. Before now, and then when you even look at that under recovery, a situation where you as an agency of government hold the yam, you hold the knife, and you can cut it the way you like. The question is, who checks, who validates what is actually your margin that you want to recover as under recovery or as subsidy? I'm not sure there is a lot of work going into that. And unfortunately, the National Assembly that should be able to play that oversight function, to be able to call them to order. What we are seeing, the kind of handshake we are seeing between the National Assembly and the executive is not helpful to the overall good of Nigerian people.
So, well, we have already, it would seem that we've hit a brick wall somewhere there, because, well, you said you're still going to see if you can engage with the NNPC, but that even as we currently speak, it is what they tell us. It's what they tell us that we'll take. But looking at what has happened now, maybe we'll be able to get an inkling as to how well the NNPC is doing from what accrues to the state, and the federal government does publish that. Have we been able to see any marked transparency with how the states are handling revenue accruing to their purses?
So for states, it might be a little bit clearer, and that is not because of the need for them to want to follow the footsteps of federal government. It is because there are certain incentive that is attached to it. So there is a program that the World Bank is, implementing and has been on for a while that incentivizes states that is able to be transparent, right? There are different indicators, about 18 of them, that allow states to publish their reports, their budgets, their audit reports, their audited statement, and all of those indicators. When the state is able to meet it, there are certain grants that is a loan to federal government, but grant to states that is attached to it. So a lot of states is now taking advantage of that. So very significantly, we have seen improved transparency at the state level. And also what that program have also done is that it has now mandated states to use what we call the chart of accounts, right? And it's disaggregated. You can see budget line by lines what is being spent on health and all of that. And that is because there is another incentive on the side that is pushing them to do that. And we're also advocating to them such that when this incentive ends, because it is a program that has come and it will end, how can we institutionalize this process such that when the program ends and that so-called incentive is no longer there, this system can still continue. But aside from that, I think the states now also need to begin to get concerned about what happened at the national level, not just the revenue that is available for the 3 tiers of government to share, but also the kind of projects that federal government wants to implement, or ministries and departments, agencies of government, federal government want to implement. Because in the real sense, no federal government activities happen in Abuja. Right? All of federal government activities are still going to happen in one state or the other. And we are not seeing synergy in terms of what the state is planning to do or what they want to achieve, and then what the federal government is doing. It should be a case of what states have in plan, right? Some of it is being channeled into federal government activities by way of nomination of representatives from different states into the budget, by way of MDAs also including such provisions in their capital expenditures and other ways. But we don't see that. What we are seeing is there are huge amounts of development plans in the budget of the federal government, and then the state is not just interested. So you are seeing that if we put together in a particular state, federal government is going to be doing both in terms of zonal intervention project and other consolidated capital projects. Federal government is going to be spending, say, billions of naira in a state to do different projects. I would have expected that the state should be interested in ensuring that those projects are actually delivered. But it's as if do your own, I do my own.
This is both in states that are politically aligned with the federal government and those not politically aligned.
No difference, both.
But it's a very interesting revelation you made about why it would seem that we're seeing some increased transparency in the state. I know that recently Budget did sign something with the Ondo state government to help it with its transparency programs. Have you gotten more requests like that from state governments?
Oh yes, Ondo state is not the first. Ondo state is actually the sixth of that. We had partnership MOU signed with Kano, Kaduna, Lagos, you know, and just supporting that process to be able to be more transparent and accountable to the people.
Welcome back. You're watching Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. Our guest tonight is Gabriel Okeowo, Country Director of Budget, a civic organization that applies technology to intersect citizen engagement with institutional improvement. As we also know that this is an election year, we know that there will be many attempts to try and get money out for elections. I mean, this is something that is an unspoken...
Sad reality, yeah.
It's an unspoken secret. So or will I say a spoken secret, you know. Have we been able to, you know, earmark, whether in state or federal government, lines that we think a little dubious in nature, which might need a little more clarity? You understand what I mean? Or have we been able to mark out budget line items which we think, look, this we think might not exactly be going to where you say it is going to?
There are huge of them, quite a number. I mean, if I will not even quote myself or the work that we do at Budget, if we want to quote the president, as at the point when Mr. President was going to assent to the Appropriation Act, he did mention that there have been infractions, there have been insertions in the budget, right? And when we went back to check, there are well over 6,000 new lines that have been included, and what that does to us, to be sincere, in the terms of work that we do in the last 10 years, Budget as an organization, we've always analyzed our federal government budgets on a annual basis. For 2022 budget, we couldn't analyze the budget. We couldn't do a proper analysis and release a report the way we used to do.
Why?
Because the infractions are too high. They are too conspicuous, they are too loud for us to keep quiet this time around. And that's why this whole week we've been here meeting with different arms of government, agencies of government that are critical, you know, to this conversation to see what can we do. We are happy to know that the presidents have now sent back the budget back to the National Assembly for amendments with an additional request for like supplementary budgets. So if we are looking at the overall budget now, we are actually heading towards 20 trillion, right? And that calls for a huge question. The question of if we are heading towards 20 trillion, what automatically means is we are going to be borrowing more, right? 2020, 98% of the actual revenue that federal government made in the year 2020 was used to service debt, right? I'm afraid if we are going to be going into a situation where we might even be borrowing to pay, to, you know, service debt, right? And it's already looking like it. And the question is, what actually are we borrowing to fund? And we have had this debate on several fora, where we established the fact that Nigeria is not even spending enough, right? So let's just spend. And the question is, do we just want to spend anyhow, or do we really want to spend on what is important? In the consultative memo that we have done, which I will point you to some of issues that we have highlighted. There are huge numbers of projects, numbers of budget lines that are clear loopholes for corruption. Projects that are outside the mandates of ministries, agency, and department. I will give you one, and I will give you one. There is a school in Surulere, junior secondary school in Surulere, that has cumulatively 1.4 billion naira for construction, right? And that is going to be done by a agricultural research institute in Ilorin. Now, the question is, first...
Sorry, let me get this straight.
Yes, you need to get it.
You said a school in Surulere.
Yes, Lagos.
Lagos is going to be...
As a cumulative budget line, projects that amounts to about 1.4 billion naira. And that's contract or project, so to say, is going to be executed by agricultural agencies in Ilorin, in Kwara State. The first question is, how come an agency in Kwara State wants to carry out a project in Lagos? One. Secondly is, how come an agricultural institute or an agricultural agency wants to carry out a construction, a building of blocks of classrooms and ICT center? What is the correlation? And when you look at it, you then ask yourself, exactly what is the work of the National Assembly? Because assuming that this was done, transmitted to the National Assembly by the executive, what the National Assembly is meant to do is that when it gets to them, they are meant to then look at it and be able to cross out. That is actually what they are supposed to be doing, to be able to say, this agency can't carry out this project, we need to revise it, or this amount is too much. But we don't get to see that. In fact, what it is looking like is like all of those kind of insertions are actually the insertions of the National Assembly members. And
I know that you have been tracking a great deal also the issue of constituency projects, the ever controversial pork barrel, according to the speaker. I'm just wondering, though, if this project, which you cite as an example, this secondary school in Surulere, which you cite as an example, being implemented by a research institute in Kwara State, where a constituency project, would it be illegal?
Definitely.
What makes it illegal?
What we are talking about is, so as it is, zonal intervention project is part of the constitution, is part of the appropriation. But we are saying, can we do things right? Number one is, if we have to do a construction, let's even say the cost, the amount is right. What is the capacity, the skill capacity of an agricultural research institute to be able to be in charge of construction? Would they be able to ensure quality service delivery, quality implementation and execution of that project? That is one. Secondly is, how easy it is for such an institute, that agency, to be the one to oversight on checking up on the project when it is being carried out. What happens to the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing? What happens to Ministry of Education? What happens to other agencies that are tied? What happens to UBEC? What happens to Tech Fund? What happened to other agencies that are directly in charge of education and can even possibly bring out a prototype of what that building should look like? Why an agricultural research institute? And that's just one. There are several of them. I mean, there are several of them. You see a situation where Institute of Oceanography and is also in charge of supply of solar lights to the tune of 1 billion naira in Delta State. And the question is, what happens to Rural Electrification Agency? What happens to Power Ministry? What happens to them to be able to handle those questions? But it will interest you to know that these are the kind of handshake that happens between the MDAs and the National Assembly that deprive the Nigerian people of its commonwealth and dividend of democracy. So
how do we ensure that these issues around our budget, especially the one for 2022, because oftentimes we know that when it's a year before an election year, the budget never really gets implemented. Yeah. If you're able to take a look at what actually happens at the end of that year, if you're getting up to 40% implementation, we're very lucky. So how do we ensure that these issues of budget remain at the front burner even as we go into an election year?
Thank you very much. I mean, what we can do is to intensify our advocacy, as we have started now. Not just budget, I believe several other organizations, civil society organizations are also doing this. And that's why we are putting out the fact, being experts in this field and haven't done this over the years, we are putting out the fact, and we hope that media agency, other civil society organizations, citizens can begin to use some of this information we are putting out to begin to engage and be wiser. Right, there might be little that we can do to the situation we have in our hand, but the 2023 election period is also giving us opportunity to begin to look out and build a change, right, that will put us towards the right direction. And to be sincere, whether INEC has rang the bell for campaign to start or not, it has actually started. Everything now is about politics, right? And we know that all we have left now is just about 4 months. Anything after July this year, to be sincere, to be hard, for any government or politician or agency of government to listen to you, right? Because they are going to be in the heat of campaign for the next political office. It will even be unsafe for us in terms of the work that we do, going to the field to go and track projects, to go and, you know, conduct town hall meetings. It will be unsafe for us to do that.
Why?
It will be unsafe because, unfortunately, there are a lot of citizen apathy that we have also faced on the field. The same citizen that we are campaigning against, we are campaigning for to have a better life, are the same people that will give information to politicians, right, to pick us up, harass us. I mean, we have been arrested several times. We have been harassed several times.
So is budget going to pause work for a while, especially with tracker after July?
We are not going to pause, but we are going to be very careful because in whatever we do, the welfare of our team is very paramount. I mean, when the chips are down, that comes back to my desk. How well have I prioritized the welfare of my team? So after July, it is going to be for us to look before we leap.
Well, we hope that the entire team at Budget is safe. I mean, we certainly do not want to be jeopardizing the life of anyone. But we have to thank you for coming on the program. Gabriel Okeowo, CEO of Budget. Thank you for coming on Hard Copy.
Thank you very much, Malpe.
Well, that's our program tonight. You can send us your feedback using the handles showing on your screen. Thank you for watching. I'm Okeowo. Good night.